Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 58 of Humanity Rising. Every day since the 22nd of May, we've been broadcasting live on Zoom and through dozens of partnering organizations to about 15, sometimes 20,000 people a day. As Ubiquity University, which is the convener of Humanity Rising, along with over 300 partnering organizations from all over the world, has created an open space, basically, between 5 and 7 p.m. Central European time, so that every day people from all over the world can come together and share what's happening in terms of the pandemic, strategize about how we can be more effective in creating a sustainable world beyond the pandemic, sharing solutions, and offering out new mindsets for a new world. It's been an extraordinary experience for those of us who day by day have been convening this program. It has emboldened me immeasurably to just witness the extraordinary amount of creative goodness out there in the world. We read the newspapers and we're in the middle of the pandemic, an unprecedented event in all of human history, where for the first time, everyone everywhere is undergoing a rather challenging, virulent situation that's forced us all into lockdown, into social distancing, into heightened awareness of hygiene in ways that we never have been compelled in our lives and in history. And yet the amount of people that are out there is just an extraordinary thing. And today we come to a very obvious but often missed solution to our global challenges, and that is how we bring the generations together. You know, I'm from the 60s. I came of age with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and, sex, drugs, and rock and roll during the 60s, during the Vietnam War, during the psychedelic revolution, the sexual revolution, during the assassinations of the Kennedys and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King in the 1960s, a maelstrom of idealism. We thought we were really going to change the world. And we did a little bit, but not as much as we thought. We changed culture, but we didn't change politics. And one of the great sadnesses of my life, in some ways, as a baby boomer, is that we weren't as successful as we thought we would be. There's been all kinds of research, as all of you know, into the cultural creatives, of the phenomenon of the cultural creatives, people who are spiritual but not religious, people who are ecological but yet also technological, people who are dedicated to practical solutions and are not ideological in any way, starting in the 1960s with about 3% of the US population, and now growing today to a full 35, going on 40% of the American people, adult population, and in Europe, and in Japan, and in cosmopolitan cities all over the world, embrace progressive values. The conservatives are a declining minority. After the Second World War, conservatives, traditionalists were 50% of the US population. Now they're less than 20%. But strangely, they have managed to maintain their lock-on power with extraordinary dexterity, in part by suppressing the vote, in part by controlling media, in part by just the lassitude of the public that, as Thomas Jefferson said in our Declaration of Independence, people will long endure tyranny. But one of the data points that has emerged is the extraordinary similarity between the millennial generation and the new data that's coming out of the Gen Z generation, those born since 2000, 2003, with the values of the baby boomers. And this is important because the challenges confronting the world are global, and the cultural creatives are the first global phenomenon. And the value propositions that the generations emerging are espousing at very young ages are the same generational impulse that came out of the 1960s. So as we begin to think about the solution set, as we'll discover today in this program, it's about a cross-generational motivation through curiosity, among other things, about how we can work together effectively around the world, across the generations, to solve global problems. So in this spirit of affirming the emerging ethos that characterizes people from all over the world, I'd like to introduce Geoffrey Nelson, who's one of the co-creatives, as many of the panels will be today, of the UpLevels project, organized around curiosity, that's bringing generational collaboration together in a very inventive way. But before turning it over to Geoffrey, I want to give a special thanks to Eve Konstantine. Eve, it's been a pleasure working with you, putting together this panel. You've been a pure delight, and I just want to acknowledge you as we start the program. Geoffrey?
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, we're thinking about bottling just an effervescence called Eve that people can pray about them on a daily basis and just kind of like.
Yeah, very good idea. Yeah. We'll help promote the product.
Thank you very much. Well, greetings from Lake Charlevoix in northern Michigan. It's currently 73 degrees and severe thunderstorms. Which has created a slightly darker studio and may come with some audio or video special effects, including a power outage. So we'll see. We'll see what the universe determines as good television today. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm especially excited to introduce all the people that I'm lucky enough to be with here today, who have brought great joy, laughter, inspiration, and ideas into my life since we started in early March. I am one of the three co-creators of what has become a podcast called the UpLevels, and a organization that is becoming known as the Curiosity Generation, the first generation not defined by age. So we're going to discuss kind of the backstory a little bit about how the UpLevels came to be. And I have the two co-creators with me, as well as 3 of the 20 guests that we had on the podcast. So first, I thought we would kind of take this chronologically as it organically happened, which is that Jeff and Eve got a hold of me. So I'd like them to introduce themselves and talk about how they became they, and then they became we, and then here we are. So Eve Konstantine, why don't you take us away?
Okay, thank you. And hi, everybody. It's really, really fun to be back all together and to have a chance to be part of Humanity Rising again, which has been this amazingly beautiful offering of Jim Garrison and the Ubiquity team. So over the course of my boomer life, I've done a lot of different things, but when Jeff Burton and I met and started talking, we discovered that one interesting thing we both had in common was that some of our closest friends were millennials, like 50 years, 40 years younger than we were. But for us, it wasn't an issue, and I guess it's not for them either. And then the COVID hit and the quarantine, and we were sort of thinking about all these people who are so just energized in their lives at this point and working flat out and doing so many amazing things. And we're just wondering how the whole quarantine is landing with them, and thought it'd be neat to have some conversations with them. Then thought, why don't we record them? And then thought, okay, that's a great idea. We could do it. We didn't even know what it was called or what we were thinking of doing, but we realized that we didn't know how to do what we wanted to do. So that's when we put out a call. Let's see. I don't know if I should go right here yet. Maybe Jeff Burton jump in, and then we could get to how together we found Geoffrey Nelson, who's made this all real.
I'm happy to jump in here too, because for the last 10 or so years, I've been dealing with European startups. I've done startups for the last 40 years. I was a co-founder of Electronic Arts in 1982, and 5 other Stanford classmates of mine and I started the company it was actually in San Mateo, California, which is right up here in the Bay Area. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area now, and have been for the last 50 years. But after that experience, I turned to realizing I felt that it was much more important to create and establish relationships with startup founders and people who are kind of trying to get ahead and not get ahead, but get into a leadership, taking a leadership responsibility and role in their generation. And I was dealing with 20 and 30-year-olds and have become actually quite good friends with a lot of them, and have put a lot of invested time and other things into their companies and startups and trying to help them realize their full potential. And it's in a way, it's at my age, it's sort of part of giving back, which in Silicon Valley is a really high value. People who succeed in Silicon Valley, everyone that I know that has done well, had a good exit or whatever, they've always given back either with time or money or just encouragement. And that's the position I'm kind of in. And we realized that I've always thought that we're totally dependent on this rising generation who's now just coming of age and has a whole lot more power at age 29 and 35 and all that than we did at that time. And it's just delightful to be engaged with them. But we also really didn't know very well how they all felt about what was transpiring, both in the pandemic case of things, or the economic situation we find ourselves in, or the social situation. And all of those are kind of coming together right now. So it was really important to us to try to find out, what is in the mind, what are the top concerns, and how can we be of assistance to these young people who are taking the leadership roles now.
So then that was the point where we decided, if we're going to do this podcast, this idea, how do we do it? And the original thinking was, I also live in California at the moment because I can't get back to Europe, was there must be somebody, because I live an hour from LA, and I was thinking there must be somebody who has a grandson or daughter who did an internship in, something like that in Hollywood. So I put out a little message on a neighborhood app, and lo and behold, we got a seasoned professional who was going to just help point us, but was so taken with the idea himself that entered Geoffrey Nelson. So Geoffrey, you take it back.
Yeah, she hoodwinked me, I would say. It's this platform called Nextdoor, which typically is used for lost cats and dogs. And did you see that cute little bird? And wasn't the sunset great? And then someone named Eve slips in. Yeah, we're thinking about doing a thing. We don't even know what the thing is. Maybe the thing's a podcast. And I'm looking through there, and I'm like, oh man. And then, but in the spirit, especially of the lockdown and all of that. And recently, I actually had been occasionally responding to requests on there too. I was thinking, just help a neighbor. I wasn't something I was most likely not going to be involved with, but let me hear what they're doing. And then, you know, in hopes I can steer them in the right way and give them a human or a software or whatever it is. And then we had a Zoom call with the three of us, and they started talking about this idea of talking to millennials around the world just to see how they were feeling and thinking. And so that was the beginning part of it. I think the process of how we got from that day to how we got to here is, I think, an interesting process. My career has been spent in communication design. And so it's been in strategy and then trying to create a clean, simple message and then figure out how to disseminate it. And the problem all through time, as you're all probably aware, is clutter. No one has Marie Kondo'd the media landscape. So it's, you know, it's very difficult to get someone's attention. It always has been. It's harder now, and difficult to take an action on top of that. So given that, and that I've worked in advertising and music and movies and television and that kind of a thing, then, you know, there are processes to how you kind of develop these things. And this was really unique and serendipitous in the fact that I did not follow that process, and we did not follow that process. And if part of the theme here is solutions that make a difference, this wonderfully was we started with just wanting to make a difference, and we may have stumbled upon a solution, you know, which was really exciting. So when they were telling me about this, and I was trying to figure out, well, how do we, you know, what is it? And there were all these questions, and the jaded Hollywood guy in me is going, so who are we interviewing, and how many followers do they have, and how am I going to leverage that, and where are we going to, you know, all that whole thing where we're just going to look all the way down the line to see, is this going to be a success or not? And I threw all that stuff away, largely because of the spirits and just the vibe of the three of us. And I said, let's just approach it super simply, more like an indie film, less like a Hollywood project. And why don't we start really simply and quietly, kind of, and let's have some of these conversations. And I don't know what we're going to find. I don't know whether we're going to, you know, after a couple of them say, maybe not, or what's it going to be. So it just started off with these Zoom calls, and Holly Odneal was one of the first ones that we did, and it was so uplifting. Now, keep in mind, this is at the end of March, beginning of April, so all of us are at, you know, heightened, you know, red alert everywhere around the world, all kind of in simultaneous lockdown, lack of information, huge fear, all that kind of stuff, way too much media pushing everything. So we were in this bubble, and we talked to Holly, and it was like I had just walked through this mist of hope and possibility. And it was like, well, if there's more of these, then this would be great. And so after we started doing some of these things, that's when, in fact, even the title and potentially a format started sorting itself out. And when we were talking to more and more of our guests around the world, ultimately doing 20, then it was, you know, plain that there was a huge exuberance and excitement and passion. It was interesting because during that period of time, we also didn't know whether we dared talk about, is there a positive on the other side of this? Because all of us were feeling such deep empathy for first responders and families and people that were dying. And so could we in fact spend some time in that space, but also try to carry forth a positive attitude to best serve us during this entire process? And that's when the term UpLevels came up. I believe it first came from Holly. And it became obvious that everyone was kind of obsessed with this idea of a better version of them and how to take that better version of them into an organization or a group or a community or their own families. And so it started to kind of have a bit of a compass. And if we can play that one little clip, I kind of made about a 1.5 minute little audio thing that ended up being our North Star, and it helped the three of us kind of really see where we were going and kind of focus. And also we played it for the guests so that they kind of knew where we were going. So if you can play this, this is an intro that's at the beginning of all of our podcasts, but was also our vision.
In a matter of days, the entire world went into lockdown. Workers sent home, restaurants, shops, markets closed. The streets were deserted. It was a forced stoppage of almost everything, except ideas. Presenting the UpLevels, fascinating quarantine conversations with young thought leaders from around the world. How do we use this time to reflect, consider, and forge a bold plan forward? How do we uplevel to a better normal? It's a shared global experience and the largest opportunity for collective empathy and understanding. Streaming chats, streaming consciousness, a celebration of the ascension of purpose, spirit, and dreams. Welcome to the UpLevels.
So that's what we used kind of to focus this. I'd like to now the exciting part of the whole thing, and the part that gives me great joy, we have three of our sample guests, Holly Odneal, Justin Faerman, and Eleni Meraki. And I'm going to send it to Holly so they can tell you a little bit about themselves and also how they have utilized the idea of upleveling in their lives and where they see that going. Holly?
All righty. Well, thank you. That intro gives me chills. I love it. So I'm coming from Santa Barbara, and I was the first guest on the UpLevels. And my experience of it basically was to come in and have a very deeply authentic conversation about things that were really happening. And the three of them was just a beautiful panel to get started. And we're already talking about update conversations, how to continue the conversation. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So you were the first one that brought up the idea of upleveling. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
so as we got into the conversation, it was basically like, how is everything being shut down working? How's it going for you, Holly? And so basically we got into this conversation around really creating the premise of how every single thing that's happening is happening for me individually and for us collectively. And so when we really got into that kind of wavelength, it was a lot of introspective time where we really got into the conversation of deep healing. Anything that was agitating to my system, that was disturbing to me, I could really use as an opportunity for my upleveling. And so that word caught on, and I'm honored that it's the name of the show now. But really that was the premise, is how can we use everything that's uncomfortable, everything that's disturbing, to really tap into a layer of deeper acceptance and compassion for ourselves, compassion for other people. So that's where it came from.
Awesome. Yeah, the time that when you jumped in at the beginning of end of March, I guess is what it was. Like literally everything you saw or read or whatever was kind of in a way darkness. And when you popped onto our Zoom screen, there was sudden light, and I was going, okay, awesome. We need to continue this. And then not too long after talking to you, Eve, of course, said, well, we really ought to go to Greece, which is what she says pretty much in every conversation. And so we did, and we got to the steps of the Parthenon, and we found Eleni there. Hi, Eleni.
Hello. So happy to be here. Thank you.
So let everyone know what it is that you're up to there, and how you're using the upleveling kind of idea in your life.
Yeah, it's actually I'm going to go a little bit back. So I was in advertising. That was my career, let's say. So I did my master's degree in marketing and an advertising career in Amsterdam. So I'm half Dutch, half Greek. And as I was in Amsterdam, I saw people like really degrading, like in my colleagues, and I saw that they were not up-leveling as such. You know, they were actually going down. And I was 25 at the time, and I just got fresh out of university, and I was all like, okay, I'm gonna do this career ladder. And then I was really disappointed with how people were actually living their lives, and you know, I got into that career path, and very soon I burned out within 2 years because it was just, you know, too much pressure, too much competition. I saw people were not really looking at my skills, but more like, okay, how can you fit within this company, and how can we make as much out of you, basically, but not really individually tapping into my strengths or my aspirations. And I was like, there's something going terribly wrong here. And I in my burnout, I decided, okay, I'm going to interview people that actually are up-leveling their life, that are making changes in their life. And I started a blog called Guts and Tail. So people that had the guts to write their own tale, basically. And I started it when I was about 27, and I got so much joy and you know, so much light out of that eventually, after a couple of years of doing that, whilst continuing my advertising job, or you know, another job, not the one I burned out, basically. I decided, okay, now I have to up-level my life, and I have to look within. What do I want to do? Why am I here on this earth? Why did I, you know, how can I be of use to this world? And that guided me to go to Greece, which was, you know, part of me. And it's from here that I decided to study again and to learn, you know, subconscious reprogramming, and like, okay, how can we actually make these changes? I found out like the people that I saw were degrading were actually conditioned in a way that was not in benefit of them, was in benefit of a bigger power, let's say. So I was like, okay, so how can I help? So I studied hypnotherapy, coaching, etc. And then I started coaching people to make these changes in their lives and to really up-level their lives. And I call them the Modern Muses. So that was my inspiration from the hills of the Muses, just off the Parthenon where I live. And that's where I would have my thoughts and, you know, okay, so how are these women, because I mainly coached women, like, so how are these women called? And then this name came to me, a Modern Muse. And yeah, and that actually is, I think, what I'm dedicated to be doing, to help people up-level their lives, but by deconditioning and actually unlearning most of our learnings, most of the things that we have been taught to be success or to be happiness or whatever, and actually go within and look, okay, what is me? What do I want? Who am I? How can I be of service to this world? And I can tell there are more and more people that are actually getting it. Like, oh, wait a minute. My school or my education system was actually not really made for me to be happy, but just to serve another purpose, really. So for me, up-leveling is up-leveling yourself first, and then seeing how you can actually use that to help others.
And now Justin Faerman. I almost changed my name just because I like the sound of it, but he had it, and there's a huge following. And so Justin Faerman.
Yeah, it's great to be here with all of you.
Tell us who you are and what's going on.
Yeah, big questions. So, geez, I like to think of myself as someone who's on a journey just to see how many levels to this game of reality there actually are, and to go as high as I possibly can, and everything that I do kind of floats around that nucleus. So, you know, the idea of coming onto the UpLevels was really fun, and so yeah, I'm really interested in, you know, peak health, peak consciousness, flow, living in flow, how we create a thriving future of peace, prosperity, and higher consciousness on the planet. And so everything I do, I run a magazine. I have an institute called the Flow Consciousness Institute, and I do advising for companies and social impact focused startups, and I do research into the nature of consciousness and reality, and everything really designed to again figure out how this game works and to share what I think are the codes. I love that we're kind of using this metaphor with the founder of EA here with us, but it's really about sharing, you know, the codes, the cheat codes to life that help us make these jumps up to the next levels, the next stages, higher and higher, and get it out beyond just a small group who can, you know, who have access to it because they're born in certain countries, but making these things available to everyone so that we can all collectively up level. Because I think that's really the name of the game, is not so much helping the people that are already have a great life, have an even better life, but really helping, you know, the bottom 75% to enjoy the same standard of living, have the same access to the same tools, and have the same quality of life so that we can all collectively rise up together. So everything I do is in service to that, and I'm excited to be here with all you guys.
You're so awesome. You know, the idea, the three of them are, and one of the things that I began, so all the guests were friends of Eve and Jeff. So I had no idea who we were going to talk to and what anything about them. And as this went on, it became abundantly clear that these were amazing individuals. You know, we only asked 3 questions in this hour-long conversation. Same 3 questions to everyone, so that we kind of had some similarity. And it was basically, the first question was, how are you doing during lockdown? How are you feeling? How are you coping with, you know, that kind of a thing? And then they would express what was happening in their lives and what was going on. And then we were wondering, like, well, are you an outlier, or are your friends and colleagues feeling the same way? And then the third question, because it did dawn on us that apparently we're boomers, how can our generation, you know, support you, be of service to you, be helpful? You want us out of the way, you want us there with you. But this didn't start, I mean, absolutely didn't start as, okay, how are the generations going to talk? It had nothing to do with that. It sort of, you know, we became aware of the fact that that was what was happening, but that wasn't the quest. So the quest was really Jeff and Eve, number one, just out of care, wondering how their friends were doing all over the place. And then when you see the relationships that they have with all of these guys, then obviously that speaks volumes to Eve and Jeff. Either that, or they're paying them an awful lot of, you know, under the table money. I don't know, maybe Eve, you could be doing that, I suppose.
Well, guys, don't tell anyone, but I want to just jump in a minute and say that what Jim Garrison so well described in his introduction was the parallels, the similarities in purpose and in maybe internal wiring between, I don't even like this term anymore, but, you know, boomers and millennials. And what we found out in the process too is not only are we all sharing the same caring about life, love, and the planet, maybe, but we have so much fun together in the process of just talking and being and hanging out. And in fact, I live near a couple of these guys on the screen right now, and one of the definitions or the descriptions of myself that Justin gave a while ago, which I've repeated a bunch of times because I love it, is that I'm a millennial trapped in a boomer's body. Which, thank you. I like to think of it as like not quite a boomer's body, but you're right. Anyway, as you were back to what people were saying, I just wanted to get in the factor of restate the parallels. And I don't know really why that is, how that came about or how that happened, but it's very interesting. And clearly together, we can change the world for sure. And one other thing, sorry, is that what we did find out through the course of these conversations was that besides having huge value to us, the creators, there was value for our guests, that there was, and you guys maybe can speak to that better, but we heard over and over that being in conversation, being listened to and being heard and being valued was important to you guys. Anybody? Jeff, or anybody want to take it? Yeah. Go, Eleni.
Yeah, I don't know if you were talking about, about us, because my connection was a little bit unstable. But when you send me an email, or I don't know if you called or sent me an email like, hey, we're doing this project and you wanna be on it, I was first of all honored to be part of a project as such, but I was also really looking forward to talk to elders, right? Because in my surroundings, I don't have any more grandparents. My parents are from a different generation. They support, but they don't really understand what I'm doing. So, and the life wisdom that you have, and there's so much weight in that. And I think we that have, are a bit more aware, are really valuing the wisdom that comes with life, not so much the degrees or the diplomas or the papers as such, but really talking to people that have gone through life, have experienced life, have built companies, lost companies, have done have had heartache, and like your experience for me was like, okay, I really want to talk to them, I really want to understand or learn from them, and I felt, after talking to you, I felt this great, like almost like you're being held in, like a mother, father, or whatever figure, like almost like you're being held to go and up level even more. Let's say if we keep the terminology, it was very, and I've got to say, and I don't know if I've said that to you all, but ever since our first call, I have had greater courage to talk my truth. And because I felt I was not alone anymore. And not so, of course, I know I have people around me and people like-minded, like-spirited people, but it is something else to have people from another generation that are like, yeah, you're talking sanity and let's have another conversation. It gives you a great boost, and I guess that's also because of the value I give to you as in your generation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Holly, Justin.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think early in my career, I was working for Dell Computers, a massive corporation, and I had a lot of mentor-mentee relationships. And so this intergenerational sharing has always been something that's so close to my heart. But once upon a time in that environment, and I say this with a lot of compassion for the perfection in it at the time, it was a lot of the dynamic of I was kind of being this role to my mentors. It's like the daughter they never had, or, someone that was so sprightly and innocent and ready to be coachable. And I would just chop along playing this role, and I would do it. So I did it so full-heartedly. And there came a point for me in those relationships where it wasn't truly authentic. It was what I was doing all of these things because that's what it was expected of me or what was wanted of me. And so in transitioning the relationships, speaking with people that are older, wiser, for me is incredibly important. And in transitioning to a lot of relationships, just friendships of people that are naturally older than me, it's always been kind of a part of my friend circle. What I've found is just such a level of authenticity where I can truly get on and speak my truth, as Eleni so beautifully says, and be perfectly accepted and encouraged for that. And so I found a huge level of gratitude for those connections that happen on and off the camera and live streams here. Yeah, that's what I'd add.
Yeah, and I guess I'll jump on here. You know, what I really appreciate about you three and a lot of my friend circle here in Santa Barbara especially is that there isn't, you know, this kind of ageist bias that we're older, so we're wiser. And I think that what I appreciate about you guys is that there's really this egalitarian quality where it's not like, okay, hey, we're just checking in with the millennials to see what they think about things, but you know, we have it all figured out over here. It's like really an earnest, curious conversation about, hey, like, what do you think? Your ideas are valuable. And I really appreciate that, because when I was little, it was the opposite. And it was a lot of my core wounds were around adults telling me I didn't know what was what, but it later turned out that I was right. So, so I really appreciate that. And also for me too, you know, I mean, you can't help but see a difference in age with people, but at the same time, it's like, that's so low on my list of priorities. Like the only thing I care about is like, is this a cool conversation? Is this interesting? Like, what are you doing? Who are you? What are you talking about? You know, what are you focused on in life? And you guys really are awesome on that level. And you guys are doing way more interesting things than a lot of my peers. So why wouldn't I come on and hang out with you guys? So, you know, I think it's a testament to who you are, where your head's at. And, you know, that's where I want to be.
I think you've hit on, so we're the curiosity, just like the UpLevels title and idea and kind of point of direction of, oh, maybe that's what this is all about after doing a bunch of these. Then the curiosity generation is a term that we came up with, that again, the first generation not defined by age, which of course that then potentially does beg the question of, so what does define it? And curiosity at its purest form, I think, is what drove this. And by that, I mean, you have to approach it. And I was lucky enough to be with Jeff and Eve, who naturally do this. You have to approach it with a humility and a humbleness. And you have to be willing to take off those things I've learned, the precious truths I've experienced in my life. You don't have to throw them out at first. But I would say, especially when you're, you know, the key here is listening. That truly is the whole thing. And very few people actually listen these days. It's probably always been kind of like that. But the power of truly being a curious listener has more impact than the big do that you're going to do, because that allows you're empowering the people that you're listening to, and now it's not you, now it's we. And so the curiosity, I was approaching these conversations again from people all over the world in all walks of life, and even if what happened was interesting, if I started if it had encountered a previously held notion that I had in me, then I would purposely lean forward and look at the face and look at the eyes and listen to the story and look at the human and take all those things off. And when I did that, then I was able to truly understand where they were coming from and feel what their experiences were. And I found out I had no need to reach down and pick those things back up again. And that curiosity it does span, if you know, the okay boomer thing, I'll talk about the okay boomer elephant in the room for a second. I think that really refers to a lack of curiosity. It is kind of what Anna and to what Justin was saying of going, well, we have it all figured out, and what you're doing, your new thing is wrong. But if you're truly curious and passionate about that discovery process, then there is no age involved, and you are completely open to listening to new ideas and really seeing, hey, we can have a how can we do this meeting, not a why we can't do this meeting. And I hate why we can't do this meeting. Spent a lot of my life on why we can't do this. And I would just try to spin the room and go, can we just spend 10 minutes going, how could we though? Let's just say we could. And then all of a sudden people would jump on that. And then they would start throwing, well, we could do this and this, and then they'd be excited. And before you know it, we can, not we can't. So I think that embodies what the curiosity generation is about, especially the power of listening. One last point. I think probably many of us on this panel, including who's the people watching, there is something that someone has said and done for you in your life that has stuck with you your entire life. Some word of encouragement, a hug, an insight, something like that, that has meant a tremendous amount to you. And I would venture to guess that the person that said or did that probably doesn't even remember saying it or doing it, because it was kind of just this, throwaway of wanting to be helpful or caring. And that really underscores the power of maybe you don't do anything except listen. My two cents.
Does that allow me to jump in here?
It does.
With my favorite quote.
Oh, good.
It kind of fits. It's a quote from Maya Angelou that I've found over my life has been really true. And that is, she said, among a bunch of stuff, but the quote I remember most is, she said, I've learned that people will forget what you say. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's so powerful because it's so true over my lifetime. Sometimes I've have interactions with people, thousands. I meet 1,000 people a year, and sometimes one of those people 2 years later will get back to me and say, "We had a conversation in Vienna 2 years ago," and I'll think, do I remember this person? And then I look at their picture, and it strikes me how they made me feel at the time. Sometimes when I see a picture of somebody that I had a good interaction with, there's a positive feeling I have, and I realize, oh yeah, this is a great person, and so I get back to them, and I've realized that's a real key to my memory of interactions and stuff. How did I feel about them? And it sticks with me all the time, and I think that's an important adjunct to what you were just saying. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say too. Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, a couple of observations that I've made over the last 10, 15 years in dealing with companies, young people who are starting companies, and they tend to be the ones that are kind of out there and being creative and open, and you have to be open to be able to do a startup anyway. But a couple of things I've noticed is leading indicators, I would say, is that startup companies, when I was doing one in the 80s, in their presentations to investors, they'd always say, they'd give their whole solution, the problem, define the problem, give a solution, and then they would have a financial piece that they wanted to expand on. But in addition, in my day, that was about as far as a plan went and a pitch to investors went. But today, and in the last 10 years or so, 5-10 years ago, young people that I've heard pitch ideas for investment, it's fascinating to me that I've seen over the years. Recently, it becomes a part of every young person's presentation that I've seen, and this is all on high technology. They have a piece now of their presentation that relates to how their solution, whether it's a product or a service, can be beneficial and expanded to people all over the world of in every nation, whether it's just a developing nation or a fully developed nation. But that's one of the things that I found really, really important, is that young people in their 20s and 30s are now including the whole world as an audience. And so every time they have even a focused product, they're aware of how that might be turned into a benefit for the whole world, whether it be on the level of even climate change or just on a personal level. And I find that a big awakening across the world, not just in the United States, but in Europe and in Asia. So that's always been encouraging to me.
There was a question that I've seen on here, question/comment/feeling, from one of our audience members that I wanted you guys to. So her feeling is that she wants to connect with millennials, but she doesn't feel like they want to connect with her, and perhaps don't see any value in her experience, and feels like that, but really wants to jump in. Any thoughts on that conundrum?
I will just open it up, but I'm more curious to hear what the millennials here would advise her. But I mean, don't ever let your hesitations get in the way of your actions. Just do it. There's no time to waste.
Eleni.
Yeah, I think what I've learned is, if you really want to do something and it's not, you don't get anything back, then you are in the wrong audience. Because actually, as I don't know if this was a woman or a man, but you see here, we are millennials, and we are delighted to talk with people of an older generation. So this person might have been in the wrong environment, really, to be able to be heard, or to be able to listen, or I think there might be coming a request from here, Eve, Geoffrey, Jeff, for this person to join.
Holly, what are your thoughts on that for a second?
Yeah, I think when I think to the strongest connections that I've had with people outside my generation, whether I think about it like that or not, there's always a really strong thread for me. And so in the past, it was, business orientation. Nowadays, it's sometimes still a business orientation or a healing orientation, or just general curiosity about the same topics. And so it's really interesting, because yes, you have a panel of millennials here delighted to interact. And it feels like those threads to me are so important as to whether the connection will really be there. And I think this just relates back into the question of, am I an outlier, or do I speak for the full population? And it's interesting, because I feel sometimes like an outlier in that way, that maybe there's just higher receptivity with me individually and my peer group, my friend group, than there is in the entire generation. But there might also be an element of fear with millennials connecting upward as well. And so I kind of relate to it as everybody has their own reactions and internal processes going on around any interaction. And just that invitation to reach across the bridge could be so powerful.
Yeah, the interesting, when we, that third question that we asked everyone in the podcast, how can we be supportive? How can we help with anything you're trying to do? Would you prefer we get out of the way and just you want to do that? Out of the 20 people, no one said get out of the way, which was super refreshing on what that is. And in fact, one of the takeaways, again, the reason for the UpLevels was because of what you guys were all saying, and a reason for the curiosity generation came from that as well, is that there was a genuine desire to have cross-generational collaborations and conversations as part of daily life. And I will say that at a number of these things, some of the guests that we had, didn't have grandparents or parents that were still in their lives, and in fact kind of didn't have a connection, and really, kind of backwards, or with people that have been here longer, and really looked for that as well. And I think if you're asking more questions and offering less solutions, especially up front, again, with curiosity and listening and asking, then generally that will break down. I've seen in almost everything. Fear probably stops everyone. Certainly there is some power in the media from the standpoint of, I'm supposed to expect that all three of you are, now currently in your parents' basement and have no desire to accomplish anything, and have no backbone, no passion, and no want to do it. And I don't know how to operate Zoom, if you believe media. So, so get out there and experience actual people. And someone in the questions was saying, throw a party of mixed generations to see what happens, and amazing things will. I think that's probably true. And that's what the curiosity generation hopefully will become, is conversations and collaborations. We're trying to figure out what that is, but if we can figure out a way to have more conversations and let those conversations form into collaborations, and then story tell about those collaborations, and then talk about it, then, there you go. Keeps on going.
Absolutely. And that premise you're describing, that millennials are this, boomers are this, I would imagine is a really hard premise to operate from. If that's the pretense that someone has in their mind about a millennial, I imagine it would be hard to connect with that all in mind. So I do agree. I think as I get into a lot of the depth of conversations that it's available, it's age irrelevant. It's completely age irrelevant.
Yeah, because Holly and Justin, I think for you as well, you have many millennial friends or ex-colleagues, or that are not like, like us, let's say, or, you can't have these conversations with, or, it's not, we can't be put in a box as such either, I think.
Right.
Jeff and Eve, how did you create the relationships, or have these relationships form with all of these friends that you brought to the UpLevel party? I don't think I've ever asked kind of what that is. I know from you, Jeff, somewhat from mentoring, but you have deep relationships with each one of these people, not passing ones. I'm just wondering how that all kind of happened.
You want me to take that one, or start? I was about 8 years ago, I was invited to give a commencement address to the graduating class of 2012 at a place for an academic program in Munich, Germany, called the Center for Digital Technology Management. It's a joint venture between TMU and TUM, which are both universities of 40,000 students in Munich. One's a technical university and the other is more social science oriented. But they're the best universities in Germany. This program called CDTM filters out the top students from both schools and limits their each class to 40 students. And they go through a year's training as it's academic. It's an academic program, but they're also involved in training with as entrepreneurs. And after giving that commencement address, because of that, I got to know some of the students pretty well. They forced me to stay in the home of one of the students while I was there. And that was nice. I mean, this young student gave up his bed so that I could sleep in that. He slept in another room with a roommate, and somehow or other that leveled the playing field for us. And so I got to know these people. And what amazed me was how compellingly motivated, how full of integrity, how full of ideas and creative these students were. Absolutely exceptional, men and women. And I realized, Silicon Valley isn't the only place in the world where you can find a concentration of these kinds of people. And so I started expanding in my contacts in Europe, just kind of focusing first on the Munich area. And now I've created, I've established relationships with young people starting companies in most of Western European countries and a lot of Eastern European countries, which are still trying to raise themselves up after 3 or 4 decades of Soviet occupation. They're trying to create a better world for themselves. And so that's my habit, all my 40 years of being in international business. That's what I had done at Electronic Arts. I was, as a founder, that's what I was brought there to do, was develop international business for us. But I've always made it one aspect of my doing business with people is I always become friends with them if I'm doing business with them. I try to anyway. And so I have friends that are from 40 years ago that we used to be business associates who are now no longer, but they're just good friends of mine. So for me, it was always a part of enjoying what I was doing was making friends with these people. But it also made it a whole lot easier to communicate openly and honestly and across the generations. I don't think any of the young people, if you talk to them about me, I don't think the first thing they'd say was, this older guy, it means something to us, right? They don't even think about age, and therefore I don't either, which is great because I like to think that in my mind that I'm just like a 30-year-old. I know I'm not, and they know I'm not too. But it's not an issue. The age difference is not an issue, and so to the extent that in creating these relationships and nurturing them, we as older generation can provide some guidance or some stability or some groundedness or something in just support of them is what I think it makes it a compelling life in my 70s.
Eve?
So just thinking about this right now, I was reflecting and I was thinking, I think, Justin, did you and I meet? We both belong to a group called the Evolutionary Leaders. And is that where we met?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Eleni, I met through a mutual friend. And Holly, I met, it's just through Justin, it just sort of filters out. But what I was really realizing was that all my life I've had friends. When I was the age of you guys, I had friends who were my age. So I think for me, it's been always just a sort of an energetic connection, where it was alive and where we were on the same vibration and had fun together. That's where the friendships were. And so they still are like that. I still have friends even older than I am too, besides younger friends.
So I have a question here, which any one of you can answer, or all of you can answer. What is your UpLevel response to the climate challenge? How can we make it land with those who don't see it as a real issue? Did you guys hear me?
Who's talking? Justin?
Did you hear my question?
Just lost in deep thought, contemplating the question. I think that climate is an interesting question, and I know because I studied environmental science. I got my degree in environmental science, and I studied climate for a long time. And when I was really little, actually, it was one of the things that the humanity's relationship with the environment that I saw was so clearly broken and so clearly, out of balance, and was creating a lot of the issues. And so I've really been, passionate about that for my entire life, and really been working towards that. But I've also come to realize too that, there's a lot of different ways to approach the issue, and it's urgent, and yet not every part of the climate challenge has to do with climate directly. We need solutions in governance. Part of the reason that we're not doing anything about the climate is because we all can't agree. We all can't come together. We can't get our governments to do anything. That politics is broken. There's challenges in politics, right? And so there's all these different areas of human culture, human society that need to be up-leveled in order for us to actually rise to the challenge and heal our relationship with the environment. And so each of us has a purpose and a unique piece of this puzzle that is the environmental challenge, that is all of the other challenges that we face, which go far beyond the environment as well. Each of us hold a piece of that, and is the solution is in us stepping into our own genius, and in us aligning with intuition, which is really the language of the universe, is really the operating system of the universe, and is what all animals and plants operate on, and tend to produce this incredible abundance and harmony and flow when left to their own devices without human intervention. I would argue to some degree that it's our disconnection from our intuition and our feelings and our felt senses created the environmental issue in the first place. So I think that the solution is not quite as linear as it seems. A lot of the solutions that are being proposed to the environmental challenges that we face are kind of, gotta be careful. We don't want to launch a bunch of dust into space to block the sun. It's not a good idea. Okay. So I think we really have to be focused on the environment, but also focus on purpose, focus on intuition, focus on our own healing and our own community and connection if we're going to rise to the occasion. And so I would just say to everybody to, yes, be focused on the environment, do the little things, compost, recycle, look for ways to reduce your footprint, all of those things, of course. But the most important thing, I believe, is purpose, intuition, community, healing. And when we do all these things, we're really setting up ourselves for long-term success, and not just, short-term fixes to bigger problems.
That's a really great answer, Justin. Really comprehensive and big. And I just want to drop in. You really covered it and said it, that internal alignment, it's really heart-based ultimately in the end, somehow. That if we can tap into and expand and, live from this center, this energy center, that's where the connectivity lies, I think, and the resonance to everything beyond us. Or maybe I'll say even heart, mind, So maybe that's a really cool solution to the climate crisis, is everybody to just really connect inward, and by sheer development of compassion, really feel what we're doing to our Mother Earth and try to love her harder.
Yeah, I completely agree. Actually, it's so beautifully said, Justin. Really, wow. And it's really actually a matter of feeling this connection with all that is. And when you do, you cannot do harm. There is no way you can do harm if you feel part of a whole, if you don't feel alone and in individual, but if you feel part of a greater and larger system, and then there is no way that you want to harm, because by doing that you're harming yourself, and you know that. So yeah, wow, you said it beautifully, Justin. Really, wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I agree. And the more people that are individually looking at this in this way, and taking it upon themselves to really go inward, and how do we not pollute our bodies? How do we not pollute our minds? How do we not pollute our emotional qualities surrounding us? Then there becomes a collective tipping point at some point. The more people that are focused and conscious and aware of their specific environment around themselves, it adds to all of humanity.
You know, this brings up an interesting point. During the podcast conversations that we've had, yes, I changed my background. I thought it worked a little better. You know, there were a lot of opinions expressed about on the hopeful front of, you know, so we're back again. Let's go. We're in March and April. Everyone's locked down. We're not sure what's there, and there were a lot of people that we talked to that were doing a lot of thinking. And obviously there was a lot of thinking on, well, you know, we were noticing things that actually were, you know, including Zoom and other things, you know, so you have all this adoption of technology that was being, you know, potentially 3 years worth of adoption got squished into several months out of necessity, which is awesome, bringing more people into being able to utilize technology to help them in their lives. But there was so much thought and introspection on, you know, on governance and politics and organizations and things. And I remember almost everyone had the same thought, was they would talk about the things that they hoped that we could change and get going. And then there would be this moment where they'd say, man, I hope we don't forget about this, you know, assuming that there's you know, the other side, and we're just going to go back to what we were, you know, whatever normal was and all that. And obviously this is going on longer now, but I wonder how you feel about that thing where it was like, oh man, I hope we hold on to this and stick to it and follow through and don't just drop it all. Anyone?
Well, maybe this is not a non sequitur, Geoffrey, but it seems like that to me, what has come forward is all of the demands for justice now in the United States and the demonstrations in the United States and around the world for basically for Black Lives Matter. And it's expanded, of course, beyond that. But to me, that's how this will continue to proliferate. The young people are getting in the streets like we did when in the 60s. I mean, I was part of the civil rights movement. I marched in Dallas, Texas when I was a kid. There were people that were, you know, there were sit-ins at lunch counters. That's as far as anybody would go. And I, you know, that was part of my upbringing, and so when I see it happening to young people now, or see them participating now on the streets, I feel like, maybe there is a reawakening of that kind of the deep impact that has been made on this millennial, people in their 20s and 30s, and they're now coming to realize that. You know, it's up to them to keep it going. And I think that's when I see the demonstrations in the streets, that to me indicates there's some life that's going to continue on. There are legs to this whole process. And certainly in the climate change, all millennials, almost all of them talk about climate change as a major factor for them. Back when we were in our 30s, that was not such a big thing. Now I have to say that we had the gasoline oil crisis back in the early 70s, and that kind of shocked us all to be in lines for gasoline. So that was kind of an event. But yeah, I don't see, and we're not out of this whole time frame yet anyway. So I think that it has the ability to extend longer than just a flash of a few months, because we will have this similar kind of problems for probably years that we have right now.
Holly, you had a thought?
Yeah, I think my thought on this is Kind of imagine the possibility that every single person is getting exactly what they need to progress in the ways that they are individually meant to progress. So everybody has a different set of lessons in front of them. And the way I orient to this question is, how are some of the most challenging things that are coming forward for me? How can I let that be enough? Like, how do I get the lessons to a way, to an extent that the universe, however you want to call it, doesn't slap me with something bigger or slap me with something that's, will get my attention stronger. Like, how do I let the subtlety of everything that's going on get my attention in the ways where I can heal through and learn those lessons that I'm meant to learn now, so something more drastic doesn't have to happen for me to get it. And so on a collective level, I imagine, people saying, okay, I really hope this sticks. I really hope this sticks. Well, ask yourself, like, okay, how do I make it stick? What am I really learning? What are the shifts that are fully available for me right now, and how do I really anchor into those lessons at a deeper level? So realizing fully in a very empowered way that we're totally in the seat to intention exactly what we want to see and exactly what we want to see go forward. So that's kind of how I would think of it and orient to that question.
Justin, do you think that some of the things that we are seeing are perhaps an indication that there is a global introspection and up-leveling and thoughtfulness that now is in fact starting to cause movement, and in fact they will not be just dropped?
Yeah, I think that we're definitely into a new phase here, and that there's no going back, which is a good thing, because humanity loves to go back. We love to go back to normal. We love to go back to how things were. That's a big part of the problem, is that everyone got so comfortable with how the system was, even though it was super dysfunctional on a lot of levels, that it kept perpetuating the problems. And so we kind of, we like to build on Holly's words, we all kind of called in, a rude awakening or a beautiful awakening, depending on how you look at it. And I think it's really what we need. So many of the things that are coming to the surface now were always there, and they just were not being looked at or dealt with. And so even though it can be transformational and chaotic, and it can be, there can be upheaval and anger and all these emotions that come out, I think ultimately it's a good thing. If you study the nature of reality, there's a pattern that the universe is always moving towards higher levels of complexity, higher levels of evolution, higher levels of harmony and functioning. And so we're no exception. I think humans get myopic, and we start to think that we're separate. We're the only ones that are different. It's really common in human thinking. But the truth is that we're just the cell in the body of the universe, and we're in our own process of upgrading to a higher level of order. And it might take 10 or 15 years, and so it can seem like chaos, but on geological timescales, that's the blink of an eye. And so, I think 10, 20, 30 years, we'll look back and say, like, wow, that was intense, but hey, I hope that we're better off. I know we're better off ultimately, and I hope that we really embrace that, and that we lean into that edge, and not try and rebuild old systems, but ask, how can we build something even better than what we had?
Eve had an interesting question that she posed to everyone during the podcast that was coming from that area, where she said, well, what if this was happening for us as opposed to us? And it opened up some interesting conversations regarding, forced reinvention of various things. Eleni, I think, go ahead, Eve.
I was going to credit that to Holly. I believe that was Holly who brought that one forth. And you'd said Eve, but yeah. And Eleni's been waiting to say something, so yeah.
No, actually, I love it also to, you know, to talk with Justin and Holly, you know, I mean, it is so obvious that we are all having the same mindset. Like there is no way back. We are the universe experiencing itself. So there is only expansion. And because the universe expands, never shrinks. So we expand, and we are all like aware of the darkness and the healing and everything that needs to happen for it to go, you know, closer to the light. So maybe a bit philosophical this, but it is not, there is no option of going back. I mean, it's almost like if it's impossible to go back for us, huh? That is, some people want to will try to keep the control and keep, you know, but the people that you all probably have talked to, we all understand the nature of reality and the nature of our human experience here, and what we are here to do. And I think this is where I don't think as such only for a millennial or Generation X or Z or whatever. I think it's just becoming a more awakened human being and understanding your role in this bigger part. So yeah, there's no way back.
We were talking about the possibilities of these conversations and all of that. The some of the selfish things you get out of these is being able to listen to these guys. And I would someone suggested on the chat that, you know, there should be curiosity parties, which would be you know, people of all ages coming together, and what a great party that would be. I like that idea.
I love that.
I think I'm going to steal that, or at least an homage to it. But you know, you know, we had talked somewhat about how these got what they got out of our conversations, but you know, we were in this in that bubble in that period of time, and completely selfishly, I did not want to get out of the bubble of having these Zoom calls with our guests from around the world, because it was such a joyous, inspiring, really cool, gave me such energy, and it provided like this positive juice for my soul to help combat all of the things that were happening outside of that bubble. And it was so amazing. And so I highly recommend that at the very least, take the very selfish approach of conversing with people with curiosity of various ages and truly listening to what they say, because you'll get this amazing charge out of it that will buoy you for the rest of the day. It did for me anyway. And you know, I had no idea that it was going to be that. I had no idea. It was just kind of like, let's just see what happens. And it was like, wow, now this is an awesome way to spend lockdown. And Eve, I know that you were equally struck by the power of these types of conversations and listening to ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, well, I would call them purposeful conversations, and they're different from just casual conversations. We came together with curiosity, wanting to know one another and hear one another, and so that's what gives them the juice, I think, too. And anybody can do that. You don't have to have a podcast to do it. But to make it intentional, there's much more value.
Have a curiosity party, I would think.
Have a curiosity party, exactly. Good idea, whoever said that.
Jeff, how did the podcast help you on a daily basis?
Well, yeah, being isolated in my home in the hills here in Berkeley, it was delightful to so frequently during that time period get to converse with people from around the world, and to catch up with some of our guests, people that I've known for many years. Many years meaning 5 or 6 years, because they were in their early 20s when I met them, and now they're in their early 30s or late 20s. So for me, it just kind of reinforced the fact or it gave me the insight that young people actually do value being able to be heard by an older generation. I wasn't sure that was of any value to young people. So it was eye-opening to me to at the end of the conversations for the people we interviewed or talked with, for them to say, you know, I really do wish that there were a way that we could not institutionalize because they're not big on institutions, but that we could make a platform for older generation people and younger generation people to meet each other and exchange their thoughts and views and in a creative and productive way. So I was very encouraged by the conversations that we had. Absolutely.
One of the really interesting parts from the questions from the podcast was the question that I'm going to re-ask now, because we're sort of re-meeting later on than when we were in March and April. But the three of our podcast guests, what are your hopes for the positive things that can come from the situation that we've all been going through now since February and March, depending on where you were? I'm going to go to Holly first.
Yeah, so the positive outcomes that could come. So in a program recently, we were asked the question, how would you save the world if you were interested in doing so, which is another question. But if you were to save the world, how would you do it? And I think what I shared in that program was the first thing that I would do is put the whole world to sleep, all of them, just to sleep, so everybody can just rest and relax and just calm their nervous systems so that they could even orient to a level of introspection that is, available at the time. And so it's interesting because through this pandemic, in a way that happened, some people had significantly less time, but some with more time had that ability to rest and really restore at a cellular level. And so I just see this as being really good life experience for a lot of people, however someone has been challenged through this, as just positive life experience. So when another challenge comes, they already did it through this. In a way, I think that in and of itself is valuable. And I so encourage, and for me this is really true, that everything that fell out and became unimportant during this time will continue to be unimportant to some level. I'm not going to have any reintegration of things that seem unnecessary, after this experience.
Eleni?
Eleni, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Holly. Can you repeat the question once more, Geoffrey?
What are the positive outcomes that you can see from this global experience that we're all sharing, which included various forms and still does include various forms of lockdown, but at least potentially people having the time to choose what to do with it? Are you going to UpLevel, or are you going to change things? So what are some of your hopes that things that will become positives out of this very challenging period that we're in?
I think my first and biggest hope is for people to understand that they are not alone and part of a greater whole, either through a community or whatever, but then actually a level up, like part of a greater whole. So some kind of an awakening of the human species, which inevitably will go through a darkness. So I think this is the darkness that has been experienced right now, and hopefully for good critical mass, it is there. Yeah, and on a more practical level, I think it's the understanding of our our life, how short our lives are, and how important it is that we live it in a way that is fulfilling, which is inevitably aligned with our souls. And I think many people started questioning their reality and their daily reality, and I truly hope that I believe curiosity is important, but courage is also very important. So I hope that in these times, people actually have been able, through community or through a bigger awakening or connection with all that is, to have gotten the courage to really go for that inner voice, that's that little thing that is actually always guiding you in the right way.
Justin, you're up, sir.
Yeah, I think that honestly, like the thing that I think is most beautiful is that humanity is being called out of business as usual, and that how we were living is being challenged. And I can't honestly say that like right this second that we've been awoken into this beautiful new way of life, and it's all going to be rosy from here on out. But I think that just like, ironically, because I agree with Holly, but I also think like it's like us being pulled out of that hypnotic slumber that's really important too. And it's a different kind of sleep than Holly's talking about. But that so much of the challenges that we're facing and we're creating are because of that slumber. And so we're out now, we're awake. It's like the moment in the Matrix when the red pill has been taken, and all of a sudden he's out and he's like orienting to this new reality. Like that's where we are now, and we have to learn to orient to this new reality and to use this period to come together in a more harmonious way. I think humanity is really being confronted with a lot of existential crises right now, and a lot of existential conundrums and fears and all these things that were always there, but we're just uncomfortable to look at. And so it was easier to just go on with life and business as usual. But now we're actually having to look at that. And a lot of these uncomfortable issues are coming up, which is beautiful, because in the healing process, that is what precedes the light. That's what precedes the integration and the move to a higher order, like I've been saying. So I'm excited for what's possible now. And I think we have to like get beyond a lot of the arguments that are going on and really ask, like, how can we come together around shared values that are going to allow us to thrive. And so hopefully that's what I help bring to the piece here, and all of us do. So
Eve, I'm always interested to hear what you have to say about the next.
So listening to you guys, I was thinking, first of all, the crazier things get on the planet, and it seems to be every day there's another level that you just had thought maybe we were at the end of it. But I do think the crazier things get, it's an indicator of the closer we are, to the ultimate breakthrough and to the next higher order of the next higher order. But reflecting on Holly's question, can this be enough? I think we've heard a lot of predictions that there's going to be another wave, another spike to this pandemic, not just the one that we're in now in the US, but other ones. We've heard that there's other pandemics coming. We know that the climate crisis is barreling down on us. But if I want to say, first of all, we do have what it takes as a human race. We have it in us right now. We don't have to gain anything else. We have the strength, we have the conviction, we have the courage, we have the intelligence, we have the love for one another. It's all there. It's just standing in that and operating from that every moment, and being conscious of our thoughts and being conscious of our words, which are very, very creative, and our actions. But I mean more powerfully conscious of our thoughts in that order. Thoughts are the most powerful, our words generative, and our actions. And if we are doing that, then maybe we don't have to experience this successive wave of crises that's supposed to be coming. Maybe we can let some of these be enough, that we can collectively get it and make the necessary shifts intrapersonally and collectively, so that we can, take the fast route now to the next turn on the spiral of the evolution of humanity.
And that's why I love to always hear you.
Thank you.
So the kind of in a as we're approaching a wrap up here, there's been questions about how to find us as far as the podcast. You can go to the UpLevels.com. The podcast is on many podcasting platforms, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, yada, yada. But you can hear them all right on our website. We have, I would say that we have just hatched. Our eyes are opening. We're a little bit wet and I still have eggshell in my hair. The idea, again, was this kind of organic progression to see what happens. So it started with the conversations, and do we think these conversations have value to share? And we did, and that's how it became this podcast. And now we've put out the first 5 of 20 episodes, and we're going to begin on a weekly basis releasing the rest of them. I do encourage you to listen to them for a restorative experience and an eye-opening experience. The range of locations, of histories of those locations, how the lockdown was affecting them, how it has manifested in their lives. Lithuanian tech startups in Croatia, and we were in Austria and Germany and several times in Greece, and and they not only have unbelievable spirits and ideas, many, many, many of them are all working on truly interesting tech startups and things to help people's lives, and are interested in doing that. And I'm hoping that that this thing, at the very least, that we can provide, some inspiration, and that there's value in listening to the UpLevels. We're of course looking for a little help. If you can, rate, review, thumbs up, whatever. We want to see whether we can grow this. We're going to begin trying to do a little outreach to try to bring more audience to it, and that was one of the ideas of being here, was at least presenting what it is and seeing whether or not you think it's bringing value to you. So there will be new releases coming out, so that's exciting. And we're thinking now, because we again in March and April and a little bit into May, we obviously didn't know. There was no expiration date on the container labeled pandemic, and so we didn't know, so is this short, long, forever? What is it? We still don't know per se, but it sort of seems now, just out of the original curiosity and caring that the 3 of us have for our guests, is probably doing a follow-up and doing some more Zoom calls to see, check in with them and see how life is there and what has changed and what has transpired, that I think would be super interesting conversations. So we're going to host them, and we'll see what happens. So I know that Jim wanted to jump in here at some point. So
I want to say thank you to Jim too.
Yes.
For having us on. For tolerating us.
Out of the room. And we didn't really demonstrate any of the chaos that is typically our group conversations. So,
We were very well behaved.
I know, I'm shocked and a little bit appalled.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, thank you all so much. Jeff, you did a splendid job moderating and steering the conversation. And each one of you spoke so heartfully and so powerfully about these issues that we're confronted by, and how we have to reach across the generations to solve them. I'd make just a couple comments in closing that were just coming to my mind. That one of our panelists a couple weeks ago was pointing out a statistic that I think is sobering and worth pondering. He said that when the first of the baby boomers reached the age of 39, the baby boomers were contributing about 21% of the US economy as a group. This year, the first of the millennials are reaching age 39, and they're contributing about 2.5% of the overall economy in the United States. And we had a real discussion around that. And I think one of the challenges that we face as we seek to solve these problems, as we reach across the generational divides, is an increasingly ineffectual and I would say damaged neoliberal economic system that is constraining the creativity of our young. And so that's just something that I wanted to add to the conversation, because I think it's a very important point, that we're not in a global situation of possibility. We are at one level, but at another level, we're particularly in the United States, with 4 years of the Trump administration and a systematic damaging of the institutions that undergird the American Republic. All of us are experiencing a heightened contradiction between what we want to express and the capacity of the system itself, which is increasingly broken, to absorb it and to transform. It's also worth noting that if you look back over social movements and change, like we're seeing sort of right now in the United States with Trump, with a lock grip on about 35% of the population, that's a pretty normal statistic in these kinds of times. During the American Revolution, for example, during the French Revolution, Russian Revolution, about a third of the people support an extreme right or an extreme conservative point of view. All the way through the Revolutionary War, a third of the American public were completely opposed to the revolution. About a third were neutral, and about a third supported the revolution. And that statistic is very hard to break. There seems to be a patterning, a statistical patterning at times of extraordinary social change such as ours. And I raise this because I think it's worth pondering very deeply the question that you asked, Jeff, about, so how do we deal with people who are climate deniers, who refuse to acknowledge overwhelming evidence? And I think the answer is not much. Because that worldview is reinforced by ideologies and perceptions that are almost unbreakable. And I will say this as someone who was born and the son of a missionary, Baptist missionary. My entire family are evangelical Christians, fervent. For them, the worse the situation gets, the more thrilled they are, because for them, it means the rapture.
Yeah.
And I kind of broke my head against that wall year after year. And I finally realized after historical research that, you know what, Buckminster Fuller was right. The object here is not to change minds, but to just create the future. And I just wanted to put that into the mix as we reach it cross generationally and cross ethnically and cross nationally and cross culturally. We need to be careful in a situation where we're running out of time to make a difference, to really focus on what actually is going to make the difference. And historically, that's not in convincing people.
Right.
That is in doing what needs to be done as energetically and as fervently as absolutely possible. That's actually the revolution. The revolution always comes with massive resistance. And there are no exceptions to this. And so as we move into this next decade where scientists are telling us we've got only a few more years to turn it around, one of the themes that Buckminster Fuller keeps coming up in our deliberations around building the future, not dealing with the dinosaurs, but creating the gazelle, as he put it. And I just wanted to put that in as just part of the mix for our contemplation. And then my final point would be just simply that when you read out the mission of UpLeveling, it is the mission of humanity rising.
Wow.
And so Eve, Jeff, Justin, Holly, Eleni would love to spend more time as to how we could synergize efforts. The one new ingredient, and with this I conclude, the one new ingredient that's never happened before is that we're all in the same conversation now. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're in China, whether you're in Brazil, whether you're young, whether you're old, wherever you are, all of us are undergoing the same pandemic. And that's what I keep thinking about. And I think UpLevel may have some role to play in this. You know, if there's no neutral ground, I think, Holly, you said this, you know, there's no neutral ground. Then how do we leverage that fact in a way that can create critical mass at a higher level of being with, you know, Prigogine, that you create islands of coherence in the sea of chaos. And the islands of coherence do not try to change the chaos. They just use the energy of the chaos, he says, to build greater and greater coherence. And somehow, you know, we're going through this pandemic, and the centrifugal force of what we're engaged in is shattering us, is dissociating us. We see it in the United States from a sea to shining sea. We see it in other countries around the world. People are just getting dissociated. So how do we create a coherence so intentionally and so skillfully that, as Prigogine says, if you can get that coherence to a certain frequency, it enables the entire sea of chaos to up-level to a higher level of coherence. And so anyway, I was just been scintillated by your conversation, and just wanted to throw in these little tidbits for whatever they're worth, because I think UpLevel Eve, is very important. And what I love about it is what you said at the end, Jeff. I think that, you know, we're little chicks breaking out of the egg, the shell, and we still got a little shell in our hair. And our eyes are a little watery, and we're kind of walking around and bumping into the wall. But the fact that you emerged out of the pandemic like a chick out of the egg is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I just want to salute you all and acknowledge everything that you're doing, because it's how nature is trying to renew us, because we are nature, we are the environment, we are the eco field, and the earth who created us is somehow trying. She's speaking through UpLevel. She's speaking through Humanity Rising. She's speaking through each and every one of us at this moment. We were born for this moment. We were born for this moment. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And you too, Jim.
And then tomorrow we
accept the invitation.
Say again?
We accept the invitation wholeheartedly.
Yeah, let's talk more. Let's talk more, because this is
fantastic.
This is the conversation, and I just want to honor all of you. And then tomorrow we're going to meet again at between 5 and 7 o'clock p.m. Central European time, and we're going to take up the issue again of activism and race and the environment. You know, we're in a collision course with ourselves at many levels, and somehow in the midst of this pandemic, the killing of George Floyd galvanized the entire world. What is that connection between a pandemic and race? There's something fundamental that we're going to tomorrow try to tease out. And we're going to do it with Aaron Abelman, who's a prize-winning musician, and a group of other Hollywood impresarios and musicians. So it'll be a lot of fun and pointing to a solution we all need to embrace. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same station, as we continue through Humanity Rising to UpLevel. That's the bottom line. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jim. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.